First of all, let me say that it's a tremendous honor to be here in Ohr Somayach. As Rabbi Salinger told you that we had a base medrash in Chicago for 35 years. And a lot of its work was dedicated to outreach. And with Hashem's bracha, we were quite successful. And we had a very close partnership with Ohr Somayach, as I think Rabbi Mendel Weinbach, Avrohom, who spoke at one of our dinners, called us Ohr Somayach West. He didn't cover the budget, but he did make expression of our closeness. And that's because all of our graduates almost exclusively would come to Ohr Somayach over other places in Eretz Yisrael, because in our humble opinion, Ohr Somayach really is the best yeshiva to come to in Eretz Yisrael if you want to grow in your Torah and in your learning. Our policy was that we had men and women programs, and the men programs, we used to keep them by us or encourage them to stay with us long beyond just commitment to Yiddishkeit, Shemet Torah mitzvahs, and so on and so forth. And we had beginning Gemara shiurim. But when it came time to send a young man to a yeshiva, like when I would graduate high school to go to Yeshiva Gedolah, the Yeshiva Gedolah was Ohr Somayach always, because our experience had showed us that this is a place where you can not only develop your learning skills in Gemara, but to develop your neshama, to become close to the Rabbi Shalom, to be a real Ben Torah. We were very proud of that relationship, and for me, Baruch Hashem, I retired, so Migdal Torah is no more. But you guys are the lucky ones. If you find yourself in such a place, take the opportunities and use out all the opportunities provided to you to become the greatest B'nai Torah, closest to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that you can. Can't refuse Rabbi Geffen, because those of you who know Rabbi Geffen, you can only refuse him once, because then he'll ask you again about 5 minutes later. I see everybody knows Rabbi Geffen. And if that doesn't work, and this is going on Torah anytime, so everybody will know this, if that doesn't work, then about 5 minutes later, he'll find another way to ask you in a roundabout way that you don't even see it coming until he asks you again. And then another 10 or 15 times. So it's very hard to refuse him, and therefore I did not. So let me just share with you some thoughts, some that I shared with Rabbi Geffen in the last few days that we had the schus to travel parts of Eretz Yisrael together. Today, I think the popular means of development in the physical sense is called pumping iron, unless I'm still behind the times.
Yeah, you're right.
But when I was younger, when I was your age, isometrics was the in thing. I don't think anybody practices isometrics anymore. I think that's gone and done. Isometric, you still practice isometrics. Okay, good. We have an old timer here, a young old timer, right? But isometrics was basically force against force in order to build up strength. That's what isometrics was. So instead of lifting things and pumping things, there was a pressure exerted, even though it was you exerting the pressure, and against another equal pressure in order to give you physical growth. And then we have spiritual growth and spiritual isometrics. The growth of the neshama comes from meeting challenges and developing along the way. The Yiddish neshama develops not by successes necessarily, which we'll talk about later, but by struggles. That's what develops the neshama. Whether you succeed or don't succeed is up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Mishnah says, Lo yalecha hamalacha ligmar. The job is not for you to complete. V'yata ben chayrin lihipota mimenu. But you're not free to walk away from it. We have to put forth effort. When you put forth effort, that's what develops the neshama. HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us. The Rabbi Shalom created us because he wants us to grow spiritually. That chelek Eloi kamimal, the spiritual component, the part, so to speak, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, that spark, that part of our neshama which comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he wants us to develop it to such a place that there are minimal, if any, barriers between that spark and its source, which means bringing us closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Developing our neshamas, developing our spiritual selves so that we can lihidabek laHakadosh Baruch Hu, to cleave to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We don't physically cleave to the Rabbi Shalom, but if we develop our neshamas, we elevate them, we can bring them closer to their source, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, without any barriers. We are born with barriers. Our body is a physical barrier. The neshama held within the mind or someplace like that develops, but it still has a physical barrier. Some commentaries say that the spiritual neshama cannot totally cleave to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with certain exception perhaps, until the person passes from this world and no longer has a physical barrier. And then the neshama can totally cleave to its source. How much will it cleave is dependent on how much we develop our neshama in our lifetimes. The more we develop our neshamas, the more we purify them, the more the sparkle, the glow, however you want to phrase it, the closer it's able to come to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what I would like to talk about this morning, with your pleasure, is the love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has for us to create a world, give us mitzvahs, choose us as a people, to give us the ability to develop that neshama, to develop that spirituality, but that doesn't end there. He's still involved with us constantly in giving us opportunities for the spiritual growth. It's not just, here's the book of instructions for living, follow it, and you will develop. There are many, many points along our lifetimes in which he will personally interact with us and give us opportunities for more spiritual development, spiritual isometrics. And that works in a few different ways. One, when we're going on the right path, he'll encourage us. There used to be a thing that Europeans knew called a glet. A glet was what a parent or a grandparent or a Rabbi would give a child or a student. It was a stroke across the cheek. It was an encouragement, a glet. It's a lost art, but it's something very special. I once merited, it's a story for another time, but I once merited to get a glet from the great Rabbi Moshe Feinstein when I was about 9 or 10 years old. It's a great story, I'll tell to you another time. But it's an encouragement. It's like when a child is learning to walk and mother and father go, yes, come on, another step, that's it, you're doing good, you're doing good. And even when the child falls down, the parent says, come on, get up, you can do it, you can do it. That's an encouragement. It may not be so easy for the child, because the child is just learning how to develop walking skills. And certainly if the child falls down and has to get up, and the parent doesn't rush over to pick the child up, because that's part of the spiritual development. It's isometrics. It takes effort. It may even be painful. And the parent encourages the child to go on and on and on. That's one way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we'll talk about that, gives us opportunities for spiritual development, for growth, with paths open to us. You can go this way and grow. You can go another way, which is the easier way, with less growth. So sometimes it's with encouragement. Sometimes the Rebbeinu Shalom knows that we are at a place where we are greater than we believe we are. We have potential and capacity to grow to a place where we may not even believe that we have that capacity. We kind of tend to sell ourselves short because it's easier. I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing the other. I'm okay. Don't. But the Rebbeinu Shalom sometimes knows that we are capable of much more. Not that he sometimes knows. He knows that sometimes we are capable, he always knows, of much more growth. So he'll not just encourage us, but he'll kind of push us and give us a really strong challenge. So instead of just encouraging us to go on like, yeah, he'll make it a little bit difficult and challenging for us, because besting that challenge, the develops the spiritual potential that the person has. And finally, sometimes, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees within us a great potential for growth, but we choose to ignore it, so the paths are open for us, but we choose the easier way out, he can actually constrict the way out in order to force us to grow in a spiritual way. Those are like three different levels. Encourage, give us choices, and we should take the more difficult road perhaps. And finally, he closes all the doors except the door that will bring us closer to him. And now let's talk about it, Lamaisa. I'll share with you a story that happened in Migdal Torah about, I would guess, 20 years ago. I'm not going to mention the person's name, even though I've done it other times, because I'm not sure where this is going. But he was a retired policeman in Skokie, Illinois. And he's actually not alive. He passed away about 7 months ago. But at the time, he was a retired policeman in Skokie, Illinois. And let's call him Jack. And he was at our learning center for at least 2 years, maybe even 3. And he comes to me one day and he says, you know, Rabbi Alter, Hashem doesn't love me. I said, okay. I've heard this before. I didn't tell him that. I said, what's up, Jack? What's the problem? He says, I don't know, you know, I'm trying and I'm trying and I'm trying. And when I finally reach a point that I feel like, wow, I'm really going to get there, Hashem drops a mountain in my path to block my road for spiritual ascent. Okay? Tell me what's going on, Jack. He says, you know, I've been here for over 2 years. I think it was maybe even 3. He said, I daven every day. I put on tefillin every day. I learn every day. I've started with reading Hebrew, Siddur, Chumash, Mishnah, Gemara. I even go to a Daf Yomi shir every day. My home is kosher. I'm Shomer Shabbat. But I have one desire that it's difficult for me to best. Super dogs. Now, if you're not from Chicago, you won't know what that is. But if you're from Chicago, you know what super dog is, on the corner of Devon and Milwaukee with the little devil with the hot dog on the pitchfork. Super dog. He says that's just one taiva that I can't give up. I have to have those super dogs. And finally, last week I said to myself, enough of being a hypocrite. Your house is kosher, you're Shomer Shabbos, you keep all the mitzvahs. You can't keep going like this. So I decided that that's it. I'm giving up super dogs. Just one more super dog for lunch, and that's going to be the end of it. So he goes to super dog at 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Place is basically empty. He orders his super dog. He sits down to eat his lunch. While he's eating his lunch, an elderly fellow comes in and also gets his lunch. And there's no other people sitting by any of the tables. It's 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So he walks up to me and he says, would you mind if I sat with you? I don't like to eat alone. He says, sure. And he sits down and they start to schmooze. Where are you from? I'm from Skokie. Where are you from? I'm from Chicago. Where did your kids go to school? They went to Mather High School. Mather High School. Oh yeah, my son also went to Mather High School. Who was his VAD leader? No, they didn't ask him that. He said, who was his coach? What team was he on? You know, they start to schmooze. And they do the Jewish geography thing. And the older fellow says to him, he says, you come here often? He says, I do actually, but today is my last super dog. And he says, really, why is that? So he didn't want to tell him that he's going to start to keep kosher out of the house as well as in the house. So instead he says to him, I'm on a retired policeman's salary and have a limited income, so it's a luxury that is not for me. So this is my last super dog. A good answer. They finish eating, and my friend Jack gets up, starts to walk away, and this elderly person grabs his jacket sleeve. He says, just wait 1 second. He reaches into his pocket, and he pulls out a fancy, laminated like business card, double business card size, folded over. He pulls out a pen, starts to write and write and write and write and write, and he stands up. He says, my name is Maury Friedman. I own super dogs. No one should have to be denied a super dog because they can't afford it. Take this card, and in the card it says, this is to introduce my friend, Mr. Jack D. Anytime and every time he comes for lunch or dinner or any meal, he's to be given a free meal for the rest of his life. Signed, Maury Friedman, a Yid. Maury and Flory, they live in Skokie. Signed, Maury Friedman. And he gives him the card. The guy says to me, here I am, Rabbi. I'm trying to do some spiritual growth. I'm ready and committed to not eat non-kosher food anymore. And Hashem throws this mountain right in my path to stop me. And I get free super dogs for the rest of my life. And so I said to him, and just as an FYI, I'm sure that a number of you have experienced this already, because in my years at Migdal Torah, I've always, almost without exception, found that when anyone makes a commitment for a higher spiritual plane of existence, for greater growth, to draw closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, almost always a mountain seems to drop right in front of them in their path. Guy's ready to commit for Shabbos, he gets an offer for a job paying double what he was getting until now, or more, or whatever it is. It's so many different nisyonos, challenges and tests that come to a person. So I said to him, Jack, I hear what you're saying, but if you would have looked very carefully around the side of the mountain, you would have found an elevator. You push the button, you go in, you could have been zoomed right to the top. That wasn't a mountain to impede your path. That was a mountain to allow you to climb even higher. Because you believe that you can give up super dogs and keep kosher from now on, even if you have to pay for them. But the Rebbeinu Shalom knows that you're capable of giving up super dogs, even if you got them free for the rest of your life. That's how great your potential is. So the challenge didn't come to stop you. The challenge came to lift you up even higher. Get in that elevator, climb those stairs. I said, look what Rabbi Shalom did for you. Take that card and frame it and put it up on the wall of your dining room, your kitchen, your living room, and look at it every day to remind yourself how much the Rabbi Shalom loves you, that he gives you when you had an opportunity for growth, and he gave you a rocket ship to go all the way up to the top of the mountain. That's how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves you. And let that inspire you on a daily basis. And then I told him a thought, not from this week's Parsha, but a few weeks ahead in the Parsha of Vayishlach. And I'll just refresh your memory for the story, is where Yaakov goes back for some small jars across the river. He recognizes that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave them to him. It's not for him to say, I'll forego them. They don't belong to him. Like everything else, they belong to the Almighty. And that was a spiritual growth for him too. And the angel of Esav comes, right? The Malach of Esav comes, and he struggles with him. Obviously, it wasn't a physical struggle. It was a spiritual struggle. And when the struggle is over, and I'll leave that for your Rabbeim to explain to you exactly what the struggle was, but when the struggle is over, the Malach says to him, what is your name? And Yaakov says, Yaakov. And the Malach says, Lo yikora shimcha Yaakov. No longer will your name be Yaakov. Ki im Yisroel. Your name will be Yisroel. Ki sarisa im Elokim va'anoshim vatuchal. Because you struggled with the divine and with man, vatuchal, and you succeeded. So what should his name be? Yisroel, which means struggle, or Tuchal, which means success? It's an odd thing. His name should be Tuchal. You succeeded. You struggled and you succeeded. We could be the B'nai Tuchal instead of the B'nai Yisrael. And the Imrei Emes, a great Chassidic master, who I happen to share his name, Avrohom Mordechai Alter, one of the previous rabbis of Gur, asks this question. He says his name should be Tuchal. Why should his name be Yisrael, which means struggle? And he gives such a beautiful answer. He says, because what defines a Yid is not the successes. Whether you succeed, even in a spiritual endeavor, is up to the Almighty. He's the one who will decide. What defines a Yid, what defines a Jew, what comprises his neshama is the struggle, the spiritual isometrics. That's what a Yid is all about. So the Malach said to him, you struggled, you succeeded. And I see in the future, the Malach being an emissary of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is that your children will struggle for generations and generations and generations. Klal Yisrael will struggle in spiritual growth, manifesting in actual spiritual growth, manifesting sometimes in physical challenges from the nations surrounding us who don't want us to have spiritual growth. But they will struggle, and what will define them is the struggle. Said the Malach, your name is not Yaakov, which is heel, which is lower down. Your name is not Tuchal, success. That's up to the Rabbi Shalom. But what defines you is the struggle. And that's what defines us. And this is what I said to Jack. HaKadosh Baruch Hu dropped this mountain in your path, not to block you, but to encourage you, to inspire you, to give you a great opportunity for struggle so that you can arise to the top. Take this card, put it in a frame, look at it every day. P.S. The idea of putting it in a frame is because it's more difficult to take out and use. Put it in a frame, look at it daily, and remember how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves you to inspire you on a daily basis. And then there are times that we choose the easier road because, I davened in the morning with a minyan, I davened in the afternoon with a minyan, I learned for an hour or two, I'm good. When really I could be greater. But the nature is that we try to pass ourselves off to ourselves on the easier road without taking the struggle further. And then, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows how important it is for us, He'll block off all possible avenues to force us to draw closer to Him. And here's an analogy from last week's Parsha. If you remember, Hagar was traveling with Yishmael, her son, and he was sick, and he was thirsty, and he was dying of thirst, and they had no water. And Hagar put him under a tree and distanced herself. She didn't want to see him die. And then the pasuk says, Yishmael was crying out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Vayishma Elikim es kol hanar. HaKadosh Baruch Hu heard the cries of the lad of Yishmael. Vayikra Malach Elikim, and a Malach came down as an emissary of the Almighty, El Hagar, Min HaShamayim. Vayayimela, and he said to her, Malach Hagar, what's going on? What's with you? Al tiri, don't be afraid. Ki shama Elikim es kol hanar ba'asher husham. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu heard the cries of the lad where he is in the stage of life that he is, even though he's going to become a wicked person. Yishmael is not going to be easy on us. But right now, Hashem heard his cries where he is, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu judges us for the good on where we are at the time. Ba'asher husham. So don't be afraid. Now the next pasuk is a little bit challenging to me. Kumi, get up. Si'i es hanar, lift up the child. Ve'echziki es yadech boy, and hold your hand fast to him. Ki legoy gadol asimenu, because Hashem says, I will make him a great nation. I'm not sure what you need all this encouragement, and it's not even like hold his hand, pick him up, he's going to become a great nation. And then the next pasuk says, Vayifkach Elokim es eineho. Hashem opens up her eyes, Hagar's eyes, Vatera, and she sees Be'er Mayim, a well of water. Vatelech v'timalei sachemes mayim v'tashkes anar. She goes and she gets some water, and she gives Yishmael to drink. So let's just focus a little bit. And what I'm sharing with you is not my own, it's the Chofetz Chaim. The Chofetz Chaim says, Chazal tell us, Rashi brings it, Vayifkach Elikim es eineho, Hashem opened her eyes. Doesn't say that Hashem created a well of water for her. He just opened her eyes so she could see it. But the well was always there. Gee whiz, so why'd she miss it? Was she like, Rabbi Yamin says everybody is blind until Hashem opens up their eyes. Okay, but I see you. For some reason, she couldn't see the well. Asks the Chofetz Chaim, why couldn't she see the well? If she couldn't see the well, it means that Hashem didn't allow her to see the well. He didn't let her see the well. And then you have to wonder, why did Hashem not let her see the well and close off an avenue of salvation for Yishmael that was already there, that she could have easily accessed? And also, Chafetz Chaim asks, why does this whole pasuk here, get up, hold the lead, hold his hand very tight, very strongly, because I will make him a great nation? Just get to the point. Don't be afraid. Hashem heard the child, and and Hashem opened her eyes, and she saw the well. Says the Chafetz Chaim that if a person doesn't have the proper trust, emunah, and betochen in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he could have the proper trust and emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he's not living up to his own spiritual ability, but the person has other merits that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to give him a lift, then the Almighty will close off all natural avenues of salvation to force the person to turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If the well was there, and she would see it, she wouldn't have to cry out, and he wouldn't have to cry out. And the problem is that in the parsha before, when Hagar ran away from Sarah, when she ran away with Yishmael, the Malach met up with her, and the Malach told her, go back. And Hashem promises your child, Yishmael, will become a great nation. So she goes back. So one more time. Hashem promised her that Yishmael will become a great nation. So why exactly are you crying now? Why are you frustrated? Why do you think that Yishmael is going to die? You have a promise from the Rabbi Shalom, right? If you have a promise, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives you a promise, how could you possibly lose faith? You're on that level that you have a promise from HaKadosh Baruch Hu that you will succeed, and then a challenge takes over you and overwhelms you, and you lose trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But she had greatness, Hagar. She was a great woman. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw that she could rise back to that level of greatness. If the well was there and she would see it and the well was there, but if she would see it, if it was viewable to her all the time, she would have just gone to the well and gotten water and given Yishmael to drink. That would be the salvation. He's dying of thirst. He's crying out. She's looking around. She found the water. But then she would have still lost her faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That momentary lapse of emunah in betochen that he will be a great nation, she lost out on. And she found some water to give him. Okay, great. Says the Chafetz Chaim, when a person is in a situation that they are capable of greater spiritual growth, but they are not allowing themselves to it, they are denying themselves to it, sometimes the level of the person is still so great, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's love for them is so great, that he will do them a tremendous favor. He'll cut off all avenues of salvation from a natural way to force them to only turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's what he did. He blinded her. He did not let her see the well in order that she should return to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and have faith and trust. Comes the Malach and says, Malach Hagar, what's going on over here? Kumi, you have to return yourself to a place of emunah and bitachon in the Rabbi Shalom that Yishmael will become a great nation. Why are you crying thinking he's going to die? Did you forget that HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised you he's going to be a great nation? Quickly, turn around. Kumi, get up. Se'iyas hanar, lift up this child. Ve'achaziki yodech boy, and hold fast. You're moving away as he's dying. You're moving further away. Al yireh b'mais hayeled, because you don't want to see him dying. No, change your focus. Know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised you he'll be a great nation. Kumi ve'achaziki es yodech boy, and hold fast to his hand. Ki l'goy gadol asimenu, because Hashem promised you that he's going to be a great nation. She did that. She picked him up. She rejuvenated, pun intended, her trust and her emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. She refreshed her focus that, yes, I forgot, you're right, I lost momentary lapse, but I know it's the Rebbeinu Shalom promised he's going to be a great nation. Hashem opened up her eyes, and she saw the salvation that was already there. Because sometimes, not only does HaKadosh Baruch Hu give us an opportunity for growth, not only does He encourage us when we're doing mitzvahs and we're growing, and He smooths the road for us and makes it easier. Just when you came and you decided, I really want to grow, and Rabbi Geffen says, I got a great chavrusa for you. And boom, wow, I got this amazing chavrusa. That's the glet. That's the stroke. That's the encouragement. Sometimes it's the child falls down and the parents don't pick up the child. You can get up on your own. Or when you'll become parents, you'll find that, sometimes you're walking in the street with your children or whatever, a little boy, a little girl, a little baby, and they're walking and walking and walking. At Shabbos, you can't carry them. There's no Erev. And they decide they don't want to walk anymore, so they sit down on the ground. Right? You may have observed this. If you haven't, you will. And then you say, come on. You encourage the child. Come. We got to go home. Come. No, I'm not coming. Come. You've never seen this, but you will. And the parent will say, okay, bye. I'm leaving you here. And the parent will start to walk away. And the child panics and gets up and runs after the parent, right? Sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu smooths the way for us. You get a wonderful chavrusa. You get a good friend who's growing spiritually, and you can nosh and nurture from them, take from them. Sometimes he'll give you an opportunity, you don't even see it coming, for growth, but it'll take effort. It'll take isometrics. It'll take spiritual isometrics. You'll have to focus and give up or grow or commit to something that's even greater than you believed it was. And that's the mountain that has the staircase or the elevator on the side. It's not to stop our growth, it's to encourage our growth. And sometimes, based on who we are and where we are in what situations, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will even close off all the paths of possible salvation only so that we return to Him. And if we don't, maybe it'll get even stronger. In the end of Dvarim, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu talks about the troubles, the travails, the challenges that He will bring to Klal Yisrael when they're not following Torah and mitzvahs properly. And Klal Yisrael will say, the pasuk says, Yan ki ein Elokai bekirbi motzauni es haroyas ha'ela. Klal Yisrael will say, because we are not following HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not amongst us. Therefore, all these evils and all these troubles and all these difficulties have found us. Ki ein Elokai bekirbi. Isn't that great that Klal Yisrael should wake up and say that? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, V'anoichi haster aster es panei b'yaymahu. And I will hide my face on that day. What? They just expressed tshuva. They just expressed, we know why these troubles are beforing us. Hardships are coming to me because I am not following in the steps of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ki ein Elokai bekirbi matzauni es harayos ha'ela. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu's response is, V'anoichi haster aster es panei b'yayim ha'u. I will hide my face on that day. Something doesn't click, right? Says the Even Ezra. Amen. Says the Even Ezra. I'm not mishamish with Talmidei Chachamim. Says the Even Ezra. Says the Even Ezra. And I relate to this. And maybe some of you can relate to this. Says the Even Ezra, yeah, they said that. They said, Yan ki ein Elokai bekirbi. I know why this is happening to me. I'm not living up to my potential. I'm not living up to my spiritual potential, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not with me as much as I could draw Him or draw me to be closer together. But then, instead of taking the next step and saying, okay, so what am I going to do to change that? Says the Even Ezra, they don't do that. They go to other means to find solutions for their problems. Your investments are going down the tube. I need to examine my deeds and see what's going on. Why is Kadosh Baruch Hu doing this to me, and change my direction and develop? Instead, I got to get a different broker. I got to call a different brokerage house because my business is not working well, my investments are not working well. I'm not feeling well. I'll go to this doctor, to that doctor, to the other doctor, Instead of saying, I trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I need to change my relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If I got a clap on the head, I need to figure out why is the Rebbeinu Shalom orchestrating a clap on my head. A personal story, can I tell them about the heart story? I told Rabbi Geffen that a number of years ago, 3 years ago, I was having trouble walking to shul. And I was running out of breath. And I had to stop. The next week I had to stop twice to catch my breath. The next week 3 times to catch my breath. The next week I didn't even go to shul because I knew I would not make it. And it was a 10-minute walk. So I went to a cardiologist and he said, "He'll give me a stress test." Fine. He put me on the thing, put the wires on, put me on the machine. I started walking. After about 30 to 45 seconds, he hit a button, he shut the machine. Rabbi Alter, sit down. I said, I'm good. No, sit down. Okay, I sat down. I still had the wires attached to me. He pulls out his cell phone and he calls Hatzalah. You know what Hatzalah is? Yeah. Hatzalah is the Jewish ambulance service, right? He calls Hatzalah to take me to the hospital. I said, "Doc, you want me to go to get something? And I'll drive there myself. I'm fine." "No, you can't drive." I said, "I'll call my wife. She'll come and drive me. I don't need to go in an ambulance. I'm not an ambulance patient." He says, "Rabbi, you're a bomb that's about to go off." So, whatever. Took me to the hospital. They did an angiogram. They tried to put a stent in, but the blockage was in a certain place. They couldn't work. The stent couldn't work. It was at the edge. I don't know, whatever. They have to do a bypass. My son, who's very capable, comes running to the hospital, and he takes the CD of the angiogram. You know, they make a CD for you. And this is in Lakewood, New Jersey. Now, Lakewood, New Jersey, Lakewood itself has a hospital called Kimball Hospital, which better not go there. And in Chicago, in Skokie, they used to call it Death Valley Hospital, if you remember, right? Remember? Skokie Valley used to call it Death Valley Hospital. Bad hospital, don't go there. I went to Ocean County. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I went to a different hospital. Anyway, my son comes running. He gets the CD. But this is still New Jersey. It's small towns. It's like, he's going to run to Columbia. And he goes to Columbia Hospital. He goes to 2 doctors. I remember one of their names is Dr. Moses. And another guy, his partner. And they are the top cardiological, thoracic, did I get that right? Surgeons. Yeah. They're the ones who, and he brings them the CD. And meanwhile, the doctor in the hospital that I was in, not a Jew, his name was Dr. Johnson. He must have been in his mid-70s, if not older. He's done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bypass surgeries. He's quite experienced. And I called up my cardiologist, and I said to him, "Can you tell me, is this Dr. Johnson good?" He says, "He's very, very good." I said, "What about in comparison to, Dr. Moses? The Dr. Moses in Columbia?" So he says, "Their mortality rates are basically the same." It's like, they're almost the same. I said, "Okay, fine." So I said, "I'm going to go with Dr. Johnson." So my son goes to Columbia and he says, Dr. Moses looks at the CD. He says, "Yeah, I could probably put a stent in. I could do it. I'm an expert. I could put the stent in. And if not the stent, I could do the bypass, this and that." And my son comes running back. "You're going to Columbia." I said, "My dear son, I'm staying here. And I'm going to have the surgery." He says, "What's the matter with you? You can get the best doctor. You're covered with Medicare. You can get the best doctor wherever you want to go." I said, "Look, I would prefer to enter into the operating room knowing that my life is in the hands of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I need to rely on the Rebbeinu Shalom for refuah shlema. He's the one who brought this to me. I need to rely on him. I have to make hishtadlut. I have to make effort. I didn't pick a name out of a hat. This doctor here has done hundreds and hundreds of these surgeries. I checked with my doctor. He's in the same range as Dr. Moses. I would prefer to go into the operating room knowing, Rebbeinu Shalom, I'm relying on you, and please guide the hands of the doctor, rather than go to Columbia Hospital and Dr. Moses and know that I've got the best doctor, like Jews look out always, I got to get the best. I got the best doctor in the world, and just, don't get involved. Do me a favor, just stay out of it. Don't bring any bad things on me. Let the doctor, what are you, nuts? You have to follow Zachan the Eibishter. So my son calls a Jew named Shuki Berman. Shuki Berman is like is like Rabbi Führer in Israel. He's like the medical advisor for anything that you need. He knows doctors, he knows hospitals, he has protection. He's the man to go to. And I actually had a relationship with him over the years in the rabbinate that I was working with other people, so I would connect with him. And he calls me up, my cell phone, you have my number, and he says, your son tells me that you don't want to go to Dr. Moses. I said, no, I want to rely on the Rebbeinu Shalom. What's so terrible about that? The Chedusharim, my great-great-great-grandfather used to say that the reason, or was it the Swasamas? Might have been the Swasamas, that the reason that some doctors are more successful than other doctors is because they merit having the angel Raphael standing closer to them. Malach Raphael stands closer to them based on their merits, therefore their successes are greater in healing. That's what he said. So I said to my son, I said to Shuki Berman, I would prefer to go in knowing I'm putting myself in the hands of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I made an effort. It's not like I'm a fool. I made an effort to go to that. He says, Rabbi Alter, with that attitude, I suggest you go to Kimball Hospital. Because you're relying on Hashem, right? So go to Kimball Hospital, the worst hospital that there is, and rely on Hashem. It was you understand? It was a dig. But the idea is, says the Even Ezra, while it's true that people say, Yan enelkai kirbi matzauni esaroya sa'ela, it's because Hashem is not amongst us that these evils have found us, but they don't take the next step. And instead of saying, okay, so let's polish our ways, let's better ourselves, let's do spiritual growth, says the Even Ezra, they say, yeah, it's because we're not as good Jews as we could be. So I need to find another financial advisor. I need to get another business going. I need to get a better doctor. You missed the boat. You got it, but you don't want to focus on it. So you go the other way. Says the Even Ezra, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you got it. You realize it's ki ein elikai b'kirbi, and then you go to your financial advisor because your investments are turning sour. So the Even Ezra says, so Hashem says, you know what? You're going to hide from me. I'm going to hide from you. Va'anoichi haster aster es panai, b'yaymahu, I will hide my face. So in essence, what's he doing? He's closing off the sight of that well. He's hiding. He's always looking behind the lattice work. He's always meitzitz min acharakim, as David HaMelech tells us. But he's going to pull back. And you want to flounder? Go ahead, flounder. See what happens. And he closes off the well to see until you get to a point, like the Rambam says, that you're mamish hitting bottom. And when you hit bottom, you say, okay, ein lanu ela avinu shabashamayim. We only have HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I've been looking in the wrong direction. All I have is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So take this with you. In your spiritual growth, in your spiritual isometrics, as you grow in this great and wonderful yeshiva, not only in your learning of Torah and your development of a mind that can understand Torah, but in your development of your neshama, watch out for times that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives you a glet, and he makes things easier and smoother for you, and you need to stop then and say, thank you, Hashem. You got me a great chavrusa. I realize this is a message from you for my continued spiritual growth. Thank you, Hashem. Thank you, Hashem. He wants us to thank him because that means we recognize the source and we grow closer to him. And if we don't thank him, we'll find other ways to get us to focus on him, right? Or when you're ready for another step and you find a difficulty, gosh, I wanted to start a new Seder in learning. I wanted to commit myself to davening every day. I wanted to commit myself to being more careful with my kashrus. I wanted to commit myself, my banadam l'chaveiroi, how I was going to be better in talking to people and acting with people and interacting with people. And then something comes along and makes a challenge for me. Well, it would be much easier if I just... So recognize then that it's also from the Rebbeinu Shalom, and put the card in a frame and say, Hashem, you love me. You're pushing me now. You're not stroking me. You're pushing me. Well, thank you for the push. And even if times become so hard that you feel, oh my gosh, I'm getting hit right, left, and center. realize that that's also a loving father or a loving mother who also wants to encourage. I always use the example of a man standing with two children next to him at the red light, and they both dart out into the street. And a truck is coming down, he grabs them, pulls them back in, says to one of them, "What are you doing running out against the red light? You know what can happen to you. And you, patch, if you ever run against the red light, patch and tush, I'm going to give you what for?" Which one is his son? The one he gave the patch to. He cares about the other one too, but the one he loves more he gave patch to because he wants to ensure that'll be around for a long time. So sometimes the Eibishter gives us a knip because he wants us to turn to him and to look to him. And remember that and say thank you for that too. Kadosh Baruch Hu should bless you all, that you should continue in your growth and become great B'nai Torah.